Yo, what's up? It's Chris from Brooklyn Wildlife. We are going to talk about black land ownership. And it's not a new realization, but this concept of renting versus ownership. I guess we'll start with right now, I'm really focused on trying to figure out how to save some money and figure out how to put it into land somewhere. And that's something new for me because I don't care about money and I've always wanted to be able to stay mobile and not be attached to something like a house or land. But the more I think about it, I'm running into an issue of space. And like we do events and we can only do events in places where they let us. Whether it's we rent a building and create our own venue, or we rent a night from a venue that's already been created. The only person that really can say what happens is the person that owns the land on which the building has been built. And in New York, it's always been like just the cost prohibition. Like I can't imagine trying to buy property in New York City. I mean, the condos down the street, there's government housing on my corner. And a block away from there, it's $300,000 one bedroom and studio condos. There's no way I'm going to be able to save $30,000, $40,000 while I'm paying rent the way I am to buy a condo. And I wouldn't want to pay that much money for a condo. Why would I pay $300,000 or $400,000 for a condo? I can buy a house in another city or state. But even then, I can't afford to do that. Even if I went to Atlanta, I can't afford to buy a house. But I went out to Colorado and I started seeing like, whoa, there's land out here. I looked up in Wyoming and I didn't go there yet, but I started like looking at stuff up there. And it's like, there are only 600,000 people that live in the whole state. And the state is almost 3 times as large as New York State, which has over 25 million people in it, I believe. And so you can get land, like if you got $80,000, you can get land. If you got $200,000, you're getting land, but who wants to be in Wyoming? So I started looking at places closer, like Vermont, upstate New York, southern Maine. And I don't know where we're going to try to buy something, and I don't know who the we will be. But I know it's something I'm focused on. And I'll explain a little bit why. If we agree that we are in a capitalist system in terms of economic exchange, then the only way you can ever generate capital is off of land, because otherwise you're always paying out rent and always at the mercy of the landlord. How do you have land? Well, at a certain point, there were enclosure movements. There were literally smash and grab. People take land and then they have the military or they have a legal system to enforce or whatever. But we're at a point where we have property deeds and we have lots and we have a building department and we have all this other stuff. So how do you generate capital? You need land. And when I think of what's going on in the black community, land ownership affects almost every other thing affecting us. When we talk about healthcare, when we talk about education, when we talk about generational wealth, when we talk about the prison industrial complex, if we own our own land, then the school system has to accommodate us. If we own our own land, then we are able to grow our own food and not have to deal with all these food deserts. You know, if we own our own land, then we can dictate how the police and law enforcement interact with the people that live on the land. There are a lot of things that are built on that ownership. And it seems like something that isn't discussed. There's like an anti-ruralism in the black community. It's like, yo, once black people got out the country and came to cities, don't go back to the country. Don't farm. Don't be out in the wilderness. And that's worked against us in the sense of we've lost property because of that mentality. There were more black landowners out in rural America in like 1915 than now. And people will say, well, everyone has left rural areas. No. People are urbanizing and other people are then buying the land up that they're leaving. And even if people aren't moving back to those rural areas, they have a place they'll always be able to go, and they're able to rent that land out to corporations and businesses and generate money and then save money, you know? And as I think about it, there has been an orchestrated system to not allow black people to own land. All right? It's just point blank. When we were considered property, could we own land? Were we even considered citizens? At the time of the Constitution, there's no definition of citizen, but a person who could vote was defined as a citizen. And that was only white male landowners. All right? So then They free the slaves. Some black people get some land. Did we ever get our 40 acres and a mule? No. At that point, then, there are movements to stop us from buying land, and banks saying we won't give you loans, towns not letting us move in, segregation where they're literally like, this is a white town. We don't let black people live here. You can't buy any property here. Then you get into the homesteading acts, which allowed white people to gain a lot of land. Black people were excluded from it. You get into the GI Bill, which allowed soldiers to come back and invest money in property. A lot of black people were excluded from it. And you then notice by the 90s and like 2000s, any advances made in terms of desegregation and integration start fading away when you have economic dips. So in the 80s, a ton of black people lost property and were never able to get it back. In the 2000s, when all that like adjustable rate interest and mortgage stuff happened, something like 20% of black homes were lost. And they're not regained. It's more difficult now to buy a house in almost any urban area than at any other time before. And even in rural areas, the value is going up, like the cost is going up while people are leaving and towns are dying. And so I'm looking at it like, in order to be autonomous, in order to decide what happens and like what I can do, I need to own land. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just we need to own land. And I pose it as a black rural land ownership advocacy, but I also am a believer that black people are very inclusive of others. And so if you're down to work with us and build towards the goals that I'm talking about, then I don't care where you're from. I don't care what your ethnic background is, but we have to be on the same page of when groups have been marginalized for centuries, there has to be active pursuit of change. There has to be invigorated intensity and an approach, a focus, because this is important. Like, I may not have kids, but my cousin has a kid. My other cousin has 2 or 3 kids. My homies are having kids. And the only place those kids can go is run around in a concrete park in New York. Nah, man. So let's build. If you have any questions, comments, if there are things I didn't address, because like I'm getting ready, starting a new job today. I'd love to continue the conversation. And if you know people who are in rural parts of the Northeast, out in the West, down south, put me in touch. My homie Nosa Foster's down in Alabama, and one of his homies is already on some land ownership. And I want to build. I want to learn. I'm in a place where I know nothing. I've never owned property individually. I have avoided paperwork and administrative stuff. I don't know how long. So this is a change for me. We got to do it right, because you do the taxes wrong, they take your property. You file the paperwork wrong, they take your property. All right. And so let's build. All right. Peace.